The United Nations General Assembly, which helped to create the State of Israel, now elects her a member nation. The blue and white Star of David is added to the flags of the 58 other member states.
7 decades ago, Israel was elected as a member of the United Nations and embraced as a peace-loving state. But over time, dictators hijacked the world body and turned it against Israel.
Israel persists in ethnic cleansing, racial discrimination, destruction of homes, aggression against places of worship.
These violations include extrajudicial killing, arbitrary detention, collective punishment, displacement of Syrian families,
colonization and apartheid, murdering innocent civilians.
UN Watch is the voice of truth at the United Nations.
Everything we just heard from the world's worst violators of human rights is absolutely false. In its first decade, the Council passed more resolutions against one single country, Israel, than on the rest of the world combined.
Not one attacking China or Cuba or Saudi Arabia.
This is something that claims to be concern for Palestinian human rights, but which in fact is a very cynical perversion of human rights.
When politicized UN bodies target Israel, UN Watch fights back. UNRWA is supposed to be the UN relief agency for Palestinians, yet the agency is hijacked by an anti-Israel agenda. UN Watch brings top experts to testify and tell the truth.
Palestinians have hijacked UNRWA, which was to be a temporary agency for resettlement, to create and sustain a fiction that they are still all somehow refugees.
UN Watch published a report exposing how UNRWA teachers incite anti-Semitism. Despite its abuses, Western democracies use your tax money to fund UNRWA. When UNRWA's CEO became enmeshed in a scandal of corruption and abuse, UN Watch led the campaign to hold him to account. Pressure mounted, and he was fired. UN Watch brings high-profile speakers to address the United Nations. When Miss Iraq Sarah Edan posed for a photo with Miss Israel and declared her support for peace, the Iraqi regime tried to intimidate her into silence.
Edan was harshly criticized across the Arab world, prompting death threats that even forced her and her family to relocate.
UN Watch gave her voice a global platform.
Why did they never report that the Hamas terrorist organization fired nearly 700 rockets at Israeli civilians in one weekend? Or that Hamas used Palestinians in Gaza as human shields? Why do they never condemn Hamas for initiating the attacks?
When the UN singles out Israel and democracies are complicit, UN Watch fights back. Last year, Canada reversed course at the General Assembly and voted yes to an anti-Israel resolution. UN Watch broke the story. The story went viral on social media, making headlines across Canada. Thanks to UN Watch, Prime Minister Trudeau pulled back and reaffirmed his support for Israel.
We maintain our opposition to the singling out of Israel unfairly at the United Nations.
UN Watch leads the fight against anti-Semitism at the UN. When the Palestinians went before the UN Committee Against Racism, UN Watch presented detailed evidence on Palestinian anti-Semitism.
This committee has received disturbing information about anti-Semitic and discriminatory contents in textbooks used by children and teenagers in Palestinian schools.
Thanks to UN Watch, the committee ultimately ruled that Palestinian officials, media, and textbooks are propagating hate speech against Israelis, fueling anti-Semitism and violence. UN Watch fights dictatorships. The world's worst abusers subvert UN bodies, spreading lies and misinformation to deflect attention from their crimes. UN Watch holds the regimes to account, bringing brave dissidents to tell the truth.
Disqualification of 6 lawmakers, kidnappings of booksellers and activists jailed are proof of China's tightening grip.
Sorry, there is a point of order. I give the floor to China.
Would like to ask you to remind her not to use abusive language in her speech.
Please ask the speaker to take note of the points made by China.
Given its abuses, will the UN remove China from this Human Rights Council?
Thanks to UN Watch, the clash was reported worldwide.
BBC World News.
When the UN gives a free pass to the worst regimes, UN Watch brings dissidents to speak before hundreds of diplomats, journalists, activists, and students.
In approximately 3 days, the regime killed 1,500 people, often using snipers and helicopters to shoot indiscriminately into crowds.
China's repression of the Uyghurs has intensified. Chen Quanguo has orchestrated the detention of as many as 3 million Uyghurs in the modern-day concentration camps.
UN Watch helps human rights heroes get their message out to the world, bringing crucial facts to the forefront.
Human rights groups are calling for international action. He is the executive director of the UN Watch. He's saying that 101 peaceful protesters killed by Sudan.
Leading world figures recognize the crucial work of UN Watch.
UN Watch has done so many brilliant things against this mob in here behind me.
You expose them for who they are. You go after them directly, unambiguously, and unapologetically. It is effective.
You're fighting the good fight, and we need you to keep your energy up and keep going. And if anything starts to go wrong, I got your back.
With your vital help, UN Watch will continue the fight. Donate today.